Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle-earth, to another episode of Disguise Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network, and the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, A-N-T, in tonight's special Tuesday episode of Disguise Coverage. I know that's now been twice on Tuesdays in the past 3 weeks. Week 1 was because I had an engagement to attend to on Wednesday night. That was AEW Dynamite. This week, it's because the film room, we needed an extra day or so to get the film and process it. The film room will be live tomorrow, Wednesday night at 7 p.m. So we swapped here with Disguise Coverage. So here we are on the special Tuesday edition of Disguise Coverage. On the back end of this episode, we're going to be recapping several standout points, moments, notes in relation to the Buffalo Bills victory against the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football. A very substantial win, an exciting win for Bills fans, but there's a lot to take from a scheme and structural piece, in addition from a player's perspective as well. So we're going to dive into that on the back end of this episode. But in the first part of this episode, the meat of the episode, the crux of this episode, I have a guest. I am joined by Mr. Tom Ernisse of Dolphins Talk, Enemy Waters, which I think is an even funnier joke because you're a Dolphins guy.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
of course.
Thank you. I saw you smile right away, and I was like, he picked up on that pun. Yep. Tom, you do awesome work over there, and just your Twitter handle and your account as well, just covering the Dolphins. I like you. Well, one, because you're also a Miami Hurricanes guy, and I'm a Hurricanes guy. But we're not going to talk about them because Saturday was brutal. I don't even want to get into it.
We're moving on.
We are moving on. We're past it. We're on to UTSA. That's where we're going to live. It does kill me. I don't even want to get into it. I'm not going to get into it. But I like the way you present your analysis in combination with your fandom. And I think it comes pretty close to being objective in how you present things and how you talk about the team. And I pride myself on my objectivity, so I like to have that in my guests. And you crushed it last year when you were on Disguise Coverage, so you're my go-to this year.
I appreciate being back on. This is going to be a lot of fun, and this is a huge matchup for Week 3 for a division game.
Yes.
It's weird to say Week 3, huge matchup, but this has the makings to be potentially a good football game. I have my fingers crossed because Buffalo has definitely owned Miami the last several years.
Yeah, really. Even I always go back to the one Josh Allen game where Buffalo lost because Charles Clay kind of could have come back to the football a little bit, but didn't. Yeah. And other than that, Josh Allen's been phenomenal against Miami. But I love that you mentioned, kind of how important this game is. Last year, a week before at this time, Buffalo came into Miami 0-1. Miami was 1-0. Some pretty good hype around the team going into the year with Tua, and then you open up in New England, you beat New England. It's very exciting. Miami comes into the game 1-0. Buffalo's 0-1. There was a lot of hype and excitement around that team and a lot of buzz. Yeah. This time, kind of a similar situation, but a little different. Talk to us about what hype is there for this game from a Miami Dolphins perspective? Coming into this game 2-0, the Bills being 2-0, you're at home, you have a tremendous come-from-behind victory against the Baltimore Ravens where things just start clicking from a Tua perspective. Right. Hill and Waddle, kind of everything as you drew it up, it clicks. How much excitement is there around this game from a Dolphins perspective?
There is a ton of excitement. There's Facebook messages, Twitter posts, fans get in your seats early, get there 30 minutes early, get pumped, get, excited for the game. Once the players are announced, we want to be loud. We want to chant, "Let's go Dolphins," so on and so forth. So there is a ton of excitement going into this game. And I think the big difference from last year to this year is Mike McDaniel. Honestly, I think he's injected a whole new vibe within the team, and now that's also translating to the fan base. Last week was probably the craziest Dolphins game I've ever watched from a perspective of a fan. The teams with the Miami Dolphins are typically not built to come back from 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to win the game. So that felt different. That felt like something that Dan Marino was doing in the 80s and 90s consistently, bringing his team back from big deficits late in the game. Everything, like you said, it clicked. Everything from Tua, hitting his wide receivers. But, the big piece for Tua for me, rewatching that game, was his progressions, was going through his reads and making the right decisions with the football, particularly in the second half. He had a couple throws in the first half that were very first year, second year Tua-esque, trying to force it. But in the late in the third, into the fourth quarter, he was a different player. And that's the type of Tua we need to see going forward.
Talk about that Mike McDaniel piece. I'm sure we'll get into it as we, again, the focus for people who are just tuning in now. Tom and I will be giving our top 3 matchups each. We don't know what each other have picked, so we could have similar things. We could have completely different things. But Tom and I will be diving into our top 3 matchups for this game, as large scale or as granular as we want them to be, that will decide this matchup between the Bills and Dolphins. And so this next question I have for you, I'm sure we'll get into it at some point, but yeah, what's the vibe, I guess, overall in terms of how you personally are looking at Mike McDaniel? I know he seemed to kind of be, as the offseason went along, I feel like he kind of became polarizing a bit, especially within like Bills Mafia. I know for myself personally, I valued him as a, offensive mind, and then several player interviews I heard with it or heard about him. Players just spoke so highly of him, both as a person and as a play designer and guy who really knew football and understood it from the science of everything. But I know he's a little quirky, and then you got him out there talking about, Tua throws the ball left-handed and it's amazing. And he's kind of piggybacking onto the Tyreek Hill comments. And I think people kind of boxed him into this box of foolishness because of some of the hyperbole he spoke with. But at the end of the day, like, granted, it's projection and he's never been a head coach and he's never really been apart from Shanahan, but he has the potential to be a brilliant football mind. Are you starting to see, you spoke about it a little, are you starting to see some of those elements? Granted, it's only been 2 weeks, a very small sample size, but how are you feeling about Mike McDaniel right now in terms of how he's scheming this Dolphins offense?
I'm liking it a lot. I'm not going to get too overexcited because I was excited and hyped about Adam Gase. I was excited and hyped about Brian Flores because, both those coaches showed something in their first year as a head coach, even into their second year as a head coach. And then obviously fizzled out. So after 2 games, the one thing that I've learned about Mike McDaniel is what he says is what he believes, and he believes in his players. He believes what he's installing, and the team is buying in. So he's not throwing the BS out there when he said that he's going to work with Tua, he's going to get him right, and he's going to get him playing tremendous football. Through 2 weeks, that's the case. I think Tua has done a tremendous job running this offense. He understands what Mike McDaniel wants to do, and he's executing it. The one thing that I saw today that just kind of like threw me back in my chair was the amount of 10-plus yard passes Tua has thrown, 20-plus yards, the 50-plus yards. He's at the top in almost every statistical category through 2 weeks throwing the football, and I think that's a big piece of what McDaniel wanted to do. He wanted to give him the confidence, install the offense, and now he's executing it very well through 2 weeks. Now, it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks does not make a season for anybody. I'm excited to see where this progresses. And the other piece with Mike McDaniel, he said in his postgame, he wanted to feel adversity. He wanted the team to give him adversity. He wanted to see how the team responded. The fact they were down 21 points and they were able to orchestrate and really play off to what the Ravens were doing throughout the entire game. They were playing closer to the line of scrimmage because they felt Tua was just going to release the football quick, and then just kept pulling them in. And then in the fourth quarter, just started hitting those bombs over the pulled in secondary. And obviously Tyreek Hill, as really everybody knows, is extremely fast. And as soon as he gets by the secondary, Tua was able to hit those throws. And that changed the complexion of the entire game. And then now, after 2 straight Tyreek Hill throws, for 48 and 60 yards.
Mhm.
Now the defense is starting to play back, and now Tua's getting after it again with the short, quick hitters. And then they run a draw play with 40 seconds left at the 35-yard line or whatever it was.
And Edmonds takes off.
Edmonds just takes off and gets inside the 10. Brilliant play calling there because he had Baltimore all out of sorts in the fourth quarter, and it just worked. I just want to see it all game, not giving me agita through three quarters about what the hell am I watching and why are they down by so much. But it's been great to see. I just hope it continues throughout the rest of the season and going forward. But one game at a time.
I'm the same way. As growing up as a Bills fan, you can never get too excited about anything. So I completely, understand your thought process there. And yeah, that coming off that Ravens game, it was just so. I was watching that game, and it always takes two to tango. Like Miami executed and did what they needed to, but I thought Baltimore kind of shut off a little bit and took their foot off the gas. But then with Miami, once they started rolling, I think the verbiage you used, they had Baltimore all out of sorts, and they got to a point where there was such a snowball effect that no matter what Baltimore did, they were going to lose. If they were off, they got beat underneath. If they were up, they got beat over the top. There was miscommunication. There was blown coverages. And as much as I put that on Baltimore, you do have to give credit to Miami for putting them in that scenario where there's such a fine line for error. And if you misexecute mentally or physically in the slightest way, it's easy to be 6 points for Waddle or Hill. And McDaniel, I think you have to give a lot of credit for that in diagramming this scheme and this system and taking what has worked in San Francisco and his previous stops and tailoring some of it to meet Tua or meet with Hill and Waddle and throw defenses off balance. So yeah, very exciting time if you are a Miami Dolphins fan in a huge game. And that leads us to the meat of this episode. As I mentioned again before, Tom and I are each going to dive into our top 3 matchups for this week. Could be as large scale as possible. Could just be like Bills defense versus Dolphins offense, or it could be specific to, these two interior defenders versus these two offensive guards. It could be anything and everything, large scale, small scale. You folks know how we do here on Disguise Coverage. So, Tom, without further ado, and we'll switch the banner. It says game deciding matchups, Buffalo Bills versus Miami Dolphins. You, of course, are my guest. Therefore, I'm going to let you go first. So again, we're going to go in descending order from third to second to first. What's your third most important matchup that you think will decide this Bills versus Dolphins game?
I have Xavien Howard versus Stefon Diggs. Okay. I think if I'm Josh Boyer, I believe in my best player on defense. My best player on defense is number 25. He had an off game last week against Baltimore. I think he rebounds, but he's going against arguably top three wide receiver in the NFL, and Stefon Diggs. Diggs, I watched the Monday night game. There was nothing he couldn't do against that secondary of Tennessee. Absolutely incredible football player. Xavien Howard has to take that matchup. Any other player that goes against Stefon Diggs, you're going to have someone shadowing. Someone has to be over the top, double coverage, whatever you got to do to keep Stefon Diggs at bay, depending on obviously Gabe Davis as well. If Gabe Davis isn't playing, obviously that really puts the focus only on Stefon Diggs from a matchup perspective, because he's the guy they got to keep at bay. That to me is vital. If Diggs has a massive game, clearly Josh Allen's getting the ball to him and they're putting up points, and this game's going to get out of reach. But if Howard can keep Diggs at bay, keep him minimalized to an extent, I think that this could lead into a very close football game as long as Howard can keep Diggs in front of him.
Do you expect Xavien Howard to – so this is partially related to my number 3. My number 3 as well is the Dolphins coverage scheme versus the Bills passing offense, mainly related to – I think people forget about that Halloween game last year, the second meeting between the Bills and Dolphins. Miami gave them problems through about 2.5 quarters, and then all of a sudden the Bills realized that Cole Beasley versus Nick Needham was a pretty good matchup for the Bills, and they just started going to Beasley over and over to kind of turn the tide a little bit. But the Dolphins were coming out in cover 0, and they were winning in their corners versus wide receivers matchups, and they were winning in terms of messing with the Bills' protection. They were getting to Josh Allen. They were getting free runners. They were getting in his face. So that being said, I know a lot of what went into Miami's defense came from Brian Flores. He is gone. Do you expect to see, from that Xavien Howard standpoint, do you expect to see man coverage with him on Stefon Diggs? And do you expect to see him traveling with Diggs, especially, in case people don't know, Bills fans don't know, Byron Jones on the PUP list, so he's gone. Yep. So it's not necessarily that dynamic duo. It's even more on Howard. Do you expect him to travel, and do you expect to see man coverage with that?
I would expect to see some coverage coming from other guys like Kaiir, undrafted rookie, who's played really well in the first 2 weeks of the season. He actually replaced Nick Needham in the second half due to They felt the matchup that Needham was on with Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay, it just wasn't working out. So they threw in the young kid, and the numbers only about 10 points in the second half after 28 in the first half. So there was a bit of a difference there. I would expect Howard would shadow Stefon Diggs, but if that's not the case, I would think that Kaiir will get the nod, and Diggs is an elite route runner. So the rookie's going to have some he's going to have his hands full if that is the case, but I would also expect that they would, if Kaiir is the guy on Diggs, I would expect that they're going to have someone over there just in case, whether that's Jevon Holland, whether that's Eric Rowe, or even if it's Nick Needham who might be playing in the slot. They will have something lined up, but I would expect Howard be on Diggs more than 50% of the time.
Very fair. Very fair. I also love that you mentioned some of the safeties, because that leads into my other point here on number 3. I've tweeted about him several times this offseason. I really like Jevon Holland. I liked him at Oregon. I thought he should have gone higher than he did. And I loved how, granted, again, maybe potentially different scheme last year under Flores, but how he's used, his versatility. And I think that really that same level of versatility and effectiveness doesn't necessarily translate to Brandon Jones and Eric Rowe. But you've got a really nice trio of safeties there. Each has their areas of, a kind of expertise or areas that they lean towards. But each of them will see snaps deep, in the box, in the slot, performing a variety of responsibilities. And they give the Dolphins the ability to mix and match in coverage and also in their blitz packages. Holland's a really good blitzer. Rowe can blitz. Brandon Jones got the strip on Mac Jones in week 1 that led to the touchdown for the Dolphins defense. And I truly believe Jevon Holland is a rising star in the NFL with how versatile his game is. Talk about those, safeties, whether you want to focus on one or all 3 of them. How important are they to this Dolphins defense? Because part of the reason this show is called Disguise Coverage is because of what Hyde and Poyer do for this Bills defense. And Miami has, several good safeties themselves down there.
We'll start with Brandon Jones. Very underrated player, not talked about very much. But what he did last year was he led all defensive backs in sacks. A lot of that had to do with him lining up in the box, lining up on the outside of the edge rusher, getting after the quarterback. He does a great job reading trying to time his snap perfectly, where, again, the Mac Jones strip sack fumble in week 1, that was just perfect timing, where Hunter Henry and the left tackle had no idea that Brandon Jones was coming, and Mac Jones didn't even feel it either. So that is a big part of the Dolphins scheme, is that amoeba look, and you're going to see Brandon Jones and Jevon Holland mix and match near the line of scrimmage. And, Josh Allen, he has to see which of those guys, if not both, are going to be coming. And one thing that I noticed with, Jevon Holland is that he is able to, even if he's at the line of scrimmage, he's able to get back into that, like that linebacker role, and get back into that deep cover safety in the event he needs to. He's got speed. He's got the versatility to get there. He does a phenomenal job. Sideline to sideline, he can hit. He's a clean hitter too, and he hits hard. I'm excited to continue to watch him develop in this defense. Outside of that, not having Byron Jones, like you mentioned, on the PUP list, that's a big piece of the secondary. It's unfortunate. I know you guys on the other side, you don't have Trey White. So Dane last night, I'm so happy that he was okay. I know likelihood he's probably not going to be playing in this upcoming game either. But thank God he's okay. That was terrible to watch.
Yeah, it was brutal. I got a last minute invite to the game, and I was there live, and I didn't notice it initially. I just saw that he was down, and they showed the replay only once at the stadium, and you just heard everyone at once go, "Oh," because they all saw it at the same time, and just anytime you see something where everyone at once recognizes the severity, and then I can't remember the last time I saw someone get taken out in an ambulance to leave the field, not just on like the John Deere stretcher or cart or whatever. But yeah, it sounds like things are as positive as they can be. Movement is in extremities and able to communicate and everything like that. But I would expect him to be out. But yeah, from a Dolphin standpoint, just they do a lot with their coverage schemes, and again, how that plays into their front, like their ability to run those blitzes and those amoeba fronts is because of their confidence in the back end to match up with almost anyone and everyone. And I think it stems from having a good corner like Xavien Howard, and I also think it stems from that versatility in their safety grouping. Again, highlighted by Jevon Holland, who I think more people will continue to get to know his name the more he continues to play for the Dolphins. I don't even think having team success will help, but I just think if people watch him play, they'll continue to see the level that he plays at. That versatility, it's so good. I also think related to that, how the Bills are able to run the ball against the Miami Dolphins front plays into that a little bit. If Miami just can get them to be isolated to the point where it's pure pass, granted, it didn't work for Tennessee. The Titans defensive line on Monday night owned the line of scrimmage. Yeah, it was – the Bills could not get anything going in the running game. Tennessee was playing in the Bills' backfield. They were penetrating. They were getting pushed, completely owned the line of scrimmage in the run game on Monday night. But the Bills were still able to work play action. They were still able to pass the ball up and down the field. But anytime the Bills can run the ball, it makes things that much easier and that much simpler for Josh Allen and this Bills offense. So I think that's also at play as well. And I think it ties into the coverage piece because, again, what you're able to do on the back end is only because of what you're able to do on the front end and how those two things coalesce and turn into one. So, yeah, very interesting there. All right. So we got our threes, which are somewhat related, which I guess I'm not surprised, but I also thought that was interesting. I always like to see how, like, the guests on the show, like, if we think similarly, how we differ, or what we focus on or ping in on. So very interesting for our first one there. All right, now we move to our number two. Tom, again, I'm going to let you go first. What's your number two game-deciding matchup for the Bills versus Dolphins?
This is as vague as I can get, and I have it written down and I have it underlined. Protect Tua.
Okay, that's fair.
We saw what happened last year early in the first quarter. Jesse Davis, who I'd like to call Cement Feet, got
not a great nickname for a lineman.
No, he's not good. And the Steelers actually traded for that guy from Minnesota, which is even funnier. He did not get off the snap well. I think it was Greg Russo came in.
Oh, Epinesa and cleaned
out. Oh, it was AJ Epinesa.
Yeah.
And obliterated Tua's ribs. Yeah. And that, to me, at that stage of the game, 0-0, it was a turning point because that changed, obviously, losing your starting quarterback, whether he was going to be great that day or poor that day. You lost your starting quarterback, the guy that ran everything in practice leading up to the game, which was unfortunate because Jacoby Brissett just obviously couldn't do anything, and the Bills ran away with that game handily. Last year in Miami. Protecting Tua has done wonders. Only 9 pressures allowed on Tua, and he was sacked once, which was a Justin Houston off the edge missed block by Durham Smythe. And Tua took the sack. But the offensive line as a whole has been better due to obviously Teron Armstead being there has played immensely, has helped Tua. Also, Connor Williams has been very good, which is kind of a surprise for all of us because all we heard throughout the summer is he can't snap well. And
everybody was like, "Oh, they took him from guard to play center." Exactly, and so it was like, "Oh, they signed this really good guard. They're going to move him to center." I think that was more of like the laugh out loud Dolphins kind of stuff for detractors against Miami. But him coming in and playing well, like he's done his job, to your point.
Yeah. So I think one of the easiest ways you can protect Tua is trying to establish a ground game, be able to let him work in play action, let him get the football out of his hand quickly, and get it to his playmakers. That has been the MO for the first 2 weeks. Put the ball in Waddle's hand, put the ball in Hill's hand, and let them do what they do. Mike Gesicki got a little bit more involved in the second game against Baltimore, which is great to see. He's been tasked with something he hasn't been very good at, which is unfortunately blocking. But Tua pinpointed a football for him in the back of the end zone, and he went up there and got
throw. Really good throw.
Really good throw. Really good catch. That and
horrible celebration.
Terrible
gritty.
The giddy from the gritty was so bad from Gesicki. So I'm sure Christian Wilkins is gonna work with him on that. But they have to protect Tua Tagovailoa and allow him to get through his progressions and get the ball out of his hand and make the right decisions. Obviously, with Buffalo, they are opportunistic. They're the number one defense in football, only giving up 215 yards per game through 2 weeks with the likes of the Rams offense. And then Derrick Henry did absolutely nothing. So Mike McDaniel has to come up with the perfect game plan, but it also has to be perfectly executed from all 11 guys from the Miami Dolphins to stay with the Buffalo Bills in this game.
Very well said. And ironically, again, not planned, this relates to my number 2 point as well. So the Bills love to play light boxes. They love to keep 2 high safeties back pre-snap and even post-snap to a degree as well. So I've got that Bills defensive front, particularly their light boxes against the Dolphins run game. Similar for a lot of reasons you mentioned. They were able to get pressure on Tua last year, knocked him out of the game. That pressure continued against Jacoby Brissett. And this was something that, Austin Jackson didn't really turn out to be the player you guys necessarily wanted him to be. Eichenberg has been a little hit or miss. And then you come into this year, you sign Teron Armstead, who you mentioned, still when healthy, a top 5 left tackle in football and,
for sure.
played really well. Connor Williams, who has shown flashes and been a consistent player, again, at guard, but he's playing well at center. Robert Hunt showed flashes last year, comes into this year and is putting some things together. And then you got Greg Little at right tackle. And that line together, I think you got some ups and downs, potential inconsistencies. So I think step one, all of these offensive points, anything and everything for me regarding the Dolphins offense is related to them being able to get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle because of their speed. And if you can't get pressure on Tua, obviously he's going to have time to sit back and increases the odds that he can get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. And if the Dolphins get anything in their run game, you mentioned the run game, and this is really my focus here for this second point. If they get anything from the run game, it's a problem. Because anything in the run game means the Bills potentially have to spin a safety down and they have to account for that run game. Anything from the run means those RPOs that the Dolphins love to run, that Tua loves to run. He's been doing it since his days at Alabama. Anything in the run game means the Bills have to honor that R in RPO a little bit more. They have to honor that run action. Though that means those RPOs from the pass perspective have a little more shot potential because the defense has to react a little harder to the run action. Anything from the run means more defenders potentially by the line of scrimmage and thus not in space and in coverage and thus in a potentially worse position to rally and tackle Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. The Bills thus far have been successfully able to defend the run, like you mentioned, against the Rams and against the Titans. They played a little more, 7-man and 8-man and even 9-man boxes at times against Tennessee, but they were able to successfully shut down the run against Tennessee last night. They were able to use light boxes and shut things down against the Rams. And then again, to just rush 4 and play 7 in coverage behind it, their ability to have the numbers advantage in coverage, and it gives so many more options from a coverage perspective, and it helps in every week. If you have more guys in coverage than the offense does in the route distribution, that's a plus numbers matchup advantage for you. That's what you want to see, but especially against this Miami group that is led again by Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. You need those numbers in coverage because you need help with angles and pursuit and rallying and tackling and so on and so forth just to be able to maintain. And, as Craig says here in the comments, speed everywhere on offense. You have it at the wide receiver position. Even, again, Gesicki is fast for a tight end. Chase Edmonds has speed. Raheem Mostert has speed. We know that from his days. There is just speed everywhere on this Miami offense. And I think a lot of people think of it from the pass perspective, and rightfully so. You have to respect Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, especially after what you saw last week. But anything that the Dolphins get in that run game helps Hill and Waddle and Tua. Anything they get in that pass protection standpoint helps Hill and Waddle. And if Tua can just sit back there and have his time, yeah, I think those two things are related. You know, obviously the offensive line functions in pass protection and in run blocking, but that O-line is something to watch, especially for how Buffalo, what we've seen these first 2 weeks. The Bills' defensive line dominated against the Rams in the opener in week 1. They had a really great game again last night against the Titans, but now what is that defensive line also from a health perspective, I think is a question now you have to have if you're the Buffalo Bills. Is that Oliver able to play? Is Tim Settle able to play? Jordan Phillips pulled up with a hamstring injury on that Matt Milano pick 6. Does Phillips, is he able to work through and play? What does that interior of the defensive line look like? Are they still able to continue to just roll those, basically 2 sets of 4 hockey line style rotation for their lines and just go hard and be able to generate pressure and fit the run? That's a huge match. But again, especially, ironically, we have 2 kind of little revamped groups a little bit. The Bills defensive line and the Dolphins offensive line, 2 groups that each team focused on towards upgrading this past offseason. And we'll see them clash head to head in week 2. Very good piece. Very good piece. All right. Main event of the main event. Number 1, top, most important game-deciding matchup for the Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins. Tom, what do you got?
Got to stop Josh Allen.
Okay.
Fair enough. I mean, honestly, I can't say it any other way. The biggest piece of anything in this game is what can the Miami Dolphins defense do to contain or at least limit to the best of their abilities number 17 on the other side of the field. He has been an absolute monster against the Miami Dolphins in his 8 games that he's played against them. I don't think that slows down. I think he's still going to have a very good football game. But what can Josh Boyer do to try to limit his success? Obviously, try to get a turnover here and there. Josh Allen, as good as he is, he sometimes throws that one interception. You're like, what? Wait, he just threw that interception like he did against the Rams. Not the first one, the second one, I believe, where he just stared down the receiver and then it was picked off.
The Jameson Crowder one in the middle of the field a little bit.
Yeah, it looked like he was just staring him down. So those are the types of situations Miami has to take advantage of. He is a killer with his legs. I believe I've only seen Josh Allen has been blitzed maybe like a handful of times this year between both football games with the Rams and the Titans. It seems like everybody's playing 7 back. I think the Dolphins are going to be more aggressive. You're going to see the amoeba looks. You're going to see the cover 0, but I'm wary of the cover 0 part of it because that leaves your secondary one-on-one with speedy wide receivers, potentially like a Gabe Davis, a Stefon Diggs, and Isaiah McKenzie. They have to limit him somehow, some way. Will it be successful? I don't know. Not many teams are successful in slowing down Josh Allen, but they have to try to limit him and try to keep him in the pocket, put the pressure, collapse the middle of that Bills offensive line in his face, and get your hands up and bat down some passes. Do whatever you have to do. We'll see. But that's the most important thing is if you can limit Josh Allen, you have a chance to win the football game. That's the number one thing for me.
From a pressure standpoint, how do you feel about this Dolphins defensive line? Jalen Phillips coming into this year, Christian Wilkins, and I think like they really headline that group. They bring back Agba, who I think a lot of people thought were going to leave in free agency. How are you feeling about this Dolphins defensive line overall, and then in particular matched up against this Bills offensive line? Do you think they can get pressure without blitzing? How confident are you in them to kind of cause disruption in the pocket for Josh Allen?
I think because of the way the defense is run, I think they can get somewhat some pressure on Josh Allen. I think between Emmanuel Agba and Christian Wilkins, I think both those guys have been very solid since the middle of last year. Wilkins especially has taken off as an NFL player. they have to find a way to get pressure with the 3 or 4 guys up front. Obviously they change their looks, they change their their packages. They run 3-4 for the most part, but they can switch up to a 4-3. Jalen Phillips has to have a much better game. He's been invisible the first 2 weeks of the year. He's got to make plays. He's a speedster. I'm also hoping Channing Tindall, the Dolphins rookie linebacker, is able to go this week because of his speed will help if Josh Allen decides to try to tuck the ball and run. You have someone that is fast enough to at least get to him to maybe slow him down a little bit before he gets into the open field. But I think they're able to generate some pass rush with just the 4, but I think they're going to throw as many exotic looks at Josh Allen as they can. They're going to line the guys up in the A gaps, bring everybody up to the line of scrimmage, have Josh think, and then drop everybody back into coverage and see what happens. Again, you can limit him. You can only try to contain to the best of your abilities. He's a phenomenal football player. As much as a Dolphins fan, I hate to admit how good he is right now, because it's a division opponent, but he is a hell of a football player, and he's carrying this team in Buffalo to potential greater heights.
Oh, very well said. That's a nice promo opportunity for this episode. I really like the Channing Tindall piece. I liked him at Georgia. His ability, and ironically, we're sitting here talking about pressure perspectives.
Yep.
He's such a good blitzer. He is a heat-seeking missile coming forward in a variety of ways. And again, he's got the speed to go sideline to sideline a little bit. He's got a tremendous physical presence. He's somebody who, again, he's a rookie, and but I could see, we've seen Josh Allen so many times stiff arming guys and jumping over guys. I think Channing Tindall, with the size he has and the speed at which he moves, I think you could see a really nice, kind of meeting of the minds a little bit if he and Josh Allen were to just meet in the open field, because Tindall is a missile. He's big, he's forceful, he's physical. That's a really nice piece there potentially for Miami if he's able to play. I am very intrigued by that overall matchup. Again, just how Miami chooses to play Josh Allen, given some of the injuries they've got, and then the weapons. I really feel like this Dolphins defense, despite the fact that they gave up a bunch of points and a bunch of big plays to the Ravens last week, they've got some cool, versatile pieces. They've got the ability to mix and match coverages and pressure schemes and pressure packages. And I think losing Brian Flores is a step back potentially for that defense, but they still have some of those same elements with some continuity there from a structure and a player perspective. And I think you nailed it in terms of that Bills offense. It's all about, how much you're not going to stop Josh Allen in theory. How much can you limit him? I do have one quick question for you on the follow-up with that. If you had to put a points number on it, like you said, okay, if the Dolphins hold the Bills to this many points or less, they'll win the game. What is that point total for you? Do you have one in mind, or like a ballpark?
24.
Okay.
I think that's I believe enough right now in what Mike McDaniel is doing that the Dolphins can score points.
Okay.
It's, can you go shot for shot? If this game is 21-17, 24-20 or whatever, get into the middle of the fourth quarter, that's where you want to be. And I think the measuring stick here for the Dolphins, obviously winning this game would be a shock of the world factor in the NFL circles. It's like, hey, Miami has made it. They just beat the Bills. For me, it's staying competitive. They have not been competitive against Buffalo in the last 7 meetings. They need to stay competitive. So if it's 24 points, they allow Buffalo, Miami has to counter that with 27 at least. But they have to find out a way to just keep them there. If Buffalo starts putting up 30, 35 points or whatever, it's harder to come back against a well-run team like Buffalo when you're down 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter versus a team like Baltimore where their defense hasn't looked the same since I think Ray Lewis retired, to be honest.
Fair.
It's a whole different animal. So you have to keep within arm's reach of the Bills and execute your plan, execute your offense, and try to go shot for shot. Does it work? Who knows? I don't know if it will, but this is what Miami has to do to try to win the football game.
Before I get to my point, I have another follow-up point based on what you said, because you brought something that clicked in my mind when you were speaking. How important is this game for the Dolphins team? You know, you mentioning they haven't been competitive with Buffalo these last several years, and the Bills just kind of boat race them and blow them out of the water. And especially if you go back to a couple years ago in that Week 17 game, the Bills play a lot of their backups. Miami gets knocked out of the playoffs because of that game in a win-and-in scenario. We know what happened last year as well. New regime, new coaching staff, new players, Tyreek Hill, Jaylen Waddle's taken off, Tua's looking good. How important is this game for the Miami Dolphins? Again, it's early. It's only week 3. It's still a limited sample size. There's so much season left. Do you think from a Dolphins team perspective, does this game hold more weight mentally, or even if they try to play it off as, it's just another game, but how important is this game for this Dolphins team?
I think it's extremely important as a measuring stick to where they are as a young team and where obviously every team wants to go to the Super Bowl. For the Dolphins at this stage, it's baby steps, right? So even if they lose to Buffalo, 27-24 and Tyler Bass makes a field goal at the end of the game to win it, that to me is that step of like, okay, this team is dominant. This team is number 1 in the NFL. We went toe for toe with them and we lost on a last second kick. That exudes a little bit more confidence out of the team. They want to win. We want the Dolphins to win as a fan base, obviously. But if you are able to go shot for shot, play them tough, stay in the game, that goes a long way in potentially of where you can go for the rest of the season. I said at the beginning of the year, if the Dolphins were able to get 2 wins in the first month of the year with that schedule of New England, Baltimore, Buffalo, and Cincinnati on Thursday next week. If you can get 2 wins out of those 4, you're setting yourself up, because the rest, the middle portion of that schedule really lightens up a little bit in regards to the talent you're facing. But getting to 3 wins, maybe even 4 in the first month, the sky's the limit for this team for the rest of the year. But you have to play the Bills in the mix of that first month, be competitive, and then, let the chips fall where they may. And if they do a good job, if they pull the upset, or even if they lose by a little bit, they got to go into Cincinnati the following night, and that team does not look good at all. So there could be a quick rebound game if they can get it on the road. But this is a huge matchup for them, and it's a measuring stick, as Mike McDaniel said.
That's very well said. And I want to pull this comment here from Jason from the chat, who, as you were speaking there, he said, we felt this with New England for forever. No matter how much better we got, we'd lose to New England big, and we would realize we aren't there. And I thought that was so spot on. You feel that so much as a fan base, but the players also feel that as a franchise. Like, measuring stick, whoever it is, and the impact that a win or a loss against that team, what that has in the locker room and for the franchise. And I think competitive is the perfect way to put it. If Miami comes out and just gets boat raced again, it's so deflating, especially coming off after that high of coming back against Baltimore.
For sure.
You come out and just get wrecked. It's so killer. And I love the schedule piece that you mentioned as well, because you're sitting there at 2-0. If you happen to beat the Bills, you're 3-0. But even if you lose, you're 2-1. Cincinnati is wounded. They look like they're reeling. Worst case scenario, you're coming out after the first quarter. Well, there's 17 games now, so the percentages are all weird. But I'm just the first 4 games of the quarter. I'm still not adjusted to that. But even like worst case scenario, you can easily come out 3-1 from the first quarter, and then you're golden for the rest of the year. You're setting yourself up in prime potential playoff position, especially with how the AFC South looks right now at this point. We still expect the AFC West to eat themselves, alive. And even with the Raiders and the Broncos both not looking great to start this year. But there's a lot from just a pure structural and numbers perspective and playoff positioning potential. But yeah, I'm right there with you from a mentality standpoint. And I love what you said. And I love the comment there from Jason, because from my perspective, I feel like this game for Miami, and I don't want to say this with a level of arrogance, like thinking because the Bills are like what New England was. The Bills have not won a Super Bowl. They are not this dynasty yet. But I think the Bills are the class of the AFC East and one of the class teams in the AFC and also in the NFL. And when you have that team in your division, those measuring stick games are so important towards who you become for the rest of the year and potentially going forward. Like the Bills are feeling it now with having those playoff games against Kansas City. It's so much worse when that team is in your division. Imagine with the Colts all those years going up against the Patriots and losing. Imagine if the Patriots were in the AFC South. Like, it just hurts that much more when you have multiple games and you can't get over this team and you can't get over that hump. So yeah, I think from like a mental standpoint, this game holds so much weight for Miami, and again adds more to the moment and the intensity of this game, which makes it that much more exciting. So for your number one, you went Bills offense focused and how the Miami Dolphins defense can contain Josh Allen. I went on the flip side for my number one. I tried to figure out like a way to like phrase this. I want to just go simple, but I want the Bills defense versus the Dolphins speed on offense. And I'm going to start with Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, who I don't dislike Tua, and I don't think he's awful. I think I actually like him more than most people, especially in Bills Mafia, potentially do. But as an objective analyst person, I don't think he's awful. I think the media campaign this offseason was just so terrible. Things that, Tyreek Hill is saying he's, throwing a better ball than Patrick Mahomes and he's more accurate. You're just like, oh. And then like the highlights where he's throwing these bombs, but it's kind of underthrown. And then McDaniel's talking about all this stuff. And I think it was just like this perfect storm of like laugh out loud Tua type of thing to everybody outside of Miami. I don't think he's awful. And I wanted to say that because I wanted that to be like the preface for my next point here, because I don't want it to come as like a knock or like shade towards Tua. But Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, their speed is so game-changing that it makes things so much easier for Tua. Tua has his deficiencies that are present in his game and are potentially difficult to operate around. But difficult does not mean impossible. And if you have plus matchups on your offense, it becomes more possible to work around the deficiencies for anyone. If you also add in a good play caller and play designer like Mike McDaniel potentially is, it makes things even easier. And you've got Hill and you've got Waddle, and even by extension, what Mike Gesicki offers you, what Chase Edmonds offers you, what Raheem Mostert offers you. There's all these pieces around Tua that make his life simpler and easier. And that was part of my view in how I saw Miami coming into this year, because so many teams, or not teams, I think fans, they equate, and I get it, it's a quarterback-driven league, it's an offense-driven league, and I think a lot of fans just come into a game and be like, okay, what's this matchup? These two teams, okay, that quarterback's way better than that one, so this team's going to easy win. And you add it up with all the laugh-out-loud Tua stuff, and I think people didn't really see how, again, and I didn't want this to come as like a slight to Tua, but how good that supporting cast is and how tremendous their skill sets are, that it makes Tua's job that much easier, because all of these new areas of the field are becoming available for Tua. Mismatches that can be created and taken advantage of, all with just little tweaks, like the tiniest of tweaks, like pre-snap motion here, personnel or alignments here. What McDaniel did against Baltimore by getting fullback Alec Ingold more involved, which made Baltimore counter with 3 linebacker sets. And then he would split out Ingold or Raheem Mostert and go 5 wide spread, but then you got Hill and Waddle lined up in the slot, and all of a sudden you have Jaylen Waddle lined up against Patrick Queen. And you're putting these defenders in these scenarios that they're not set up for success. And it stems from good play design and good play calling. But if you take a step back even further, it all stems from that speed of Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle, which is just so game-changing. Just, they're lightning quick, they're lightning fast. If you're slightly off in your execution physically, you get beat. If you're slightly off with your communication or the mental side of it, like the Baltimore Ravens were on multiple snaps, where Jalen Armour-Davis is sitting there at 12 yards thinking he's got help over the top, and Tyreek Hill just runs right by him, and there's nobody there, which happened several times in that game, especially in that fourth quarter. You can get beat. And Hill and Waddle, they destroy pursuit angles. And you look at their yards after the catch numbers, of the 97 wide receivers that have at least 20% of targets on the year, Waddle is first in total yards after catch with 117. Tyreek Hill is second with 109. And then if you look at it from an efficiency perspective, in terms of yards after catch per reception, Waddle is tied for 7th with 7.8. Tyreek Hill is at 24th with 5.7. But again, that also ties into, because not every play is a huge yards after catch piece. Sometimes they catch a tunnel screen or they catch a drag and they get tackled after 1 or 2 yards. But with their speed, all you need, again, is one slip up mentally or physically. It's like that big home run hitter coming into the game, and they're into the 8th inning and they're 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts. You just need that one wrong pitch and it's a home run and it's gone. And the score changes and the game changes in the blink of an eye. I also pulled a quote from Tyreek Hill talking about Mike McDaniel this past weekend, and he said, quote, "It was like McDaniel was out there playing Madden. He was just lining us up quick. He was just like, Tua, just get it to the guys that can space create. That's what we were able to do. Stretch the ball down the field, get the ball down to Mike Gesicki, get Chase Edmonds involved, get Raheem Mostert involved. Really, everyone was involved today." And all those people that he mentioned are all speed guys for their positions, and Hill and Waddle, speed in general. And I love what he said there, and what McDaniel said to Tua, just get it to the guys that can space create. You don't have to be amazing. You don't have to have an amazing deep arm or tremendous accuracy or tremendous anticipation. We saw that with Josh Allen for a little bit early in his career. He wasn't able to go through that progression reading, but he could be late to reads because he has a cannon for an arm and he could fit the ball into those tight windows. Similar for Tua, you don't have to always be amazing. You could literally just like underhand toss it to Hill or Waddle behind the line of scrimmage, and there's a good chance that they're still going to get you like 5 or 6 yards, let alone if you scheme it up correctly and you're actually on time. I think it's crazy to think about. I think that matchup of how the Bills defense handles the speed of Miami's offense, in particular Hill and Waddle, I think that's so much more of a focus than how Josh Allen is defended by the Dolphins defense, just because again, maybe it's because I'm looking at that attacking perspective for the Bills and the game plan piece, but I just in the blink of an eye, and I guess you could say the same thing for Allen as well if you're looking at it from the Dolphins perspective, but in the blink of an eye, Hill and Waddle can make you wrong and it's a touchdown. And that type of speed is just, it's like horrifying if you're a defense, especially for a defense like the Bills that isn't overly fast. Even if Trey White was healthy and in there, tremendous corner, all pro, in my estimation, top 5 corner in this league.
Yep.
Not overly fast, not this dude that's running a 4.3. And even that, you still have to be technical and you have to be precise. And if you're not, Hill and Waddle can beat you, let alone what do we got coming into this game? We talked about how happy we were that things seemed to be, on the up for Dane Jackson. But you have Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle going against 2 rookie corners. Like that screams advantage. You don't even have to do, let's get cute and get them lined up inside against linebackers and create these mismatches. No, you might just want to send them outside and test the rookie corners and see what you got. Like on paper, like I think that advantage favors Miami potentially, especially with those rookie corners. And it's, man, like how are you feeling with that? Like, do you think that speed of Hill and Waddle is going to be a problem for the Bills defense, especially considering the rookie corner situation? Like, are you confident in them taking advantage of that?
I definitely think that Mike McDaniel is salivating at the opportunity to figure out how they can get these guys in space. That's the key, is get these guys in space and let them do what they do. It doesn't matter to me if Tua throws a 5-yard out to Tyreek Hill and Tyreek Hill turns it into a 30-yard gain. That's the whole purpose of a guy like Tyreek Hill and a Jaylen Waddle. Let them make plays after they get the ball in their hand. Easy. This game, the games, I look at Tua, and obviously because of the Tyreek Hill conversation and everything else, you look at Patrick Mahomes, he was one of the bottom 5 quarterbacks last year in average depth of target. But they view the guy as a superstar quarterback, which 100% he is. And Tua averages better depth of target than Patrick Mahomes, but he's viewed as he's a dink and dunker. Listen, Tom Brady made a career of dink and dunking down the field.
Dink and dunk and play action.
Years, and the guy's got 6 rings. It doesn't matter. I don't care if Tua averages 4.5 yards per pass. If the team wins the football game, it's all I care about. And let the guys make the plays to do it. They brought the guy in, Tyreek Hill. They drafted Jaylen Waddle last year. both right now are paying huge dividends for this team. And I believe that is something that they are going to try to take advantage of with Buffalo, is the inexperience at their cornerback position right now, and see what they can do. And if Tua is successful in getting the ball in the guys' hands and those guys can make plays and they keep moving the sticks, it's going to be a good, it's going to end up being a very good football game. And the Dolphins will be able to move the football down the field. But again, like you've talked about, Anthony, is, the Dolphins are going to kind of lull you asleep with those short slants and, 6, 7, 8 yard gains. And then that's going to bring the defense up a little bit. And, oh, hey, let's throw one over the top. And if it's completed, okay, now we got to back off. All right, let's run a draw play. McDaniel is going to try to do a lot of different things. He is going to play chess right in the middle of the game and see if he's able to get his guys in a position to be successful. And it's up to Tua to get the ball to those guys. 2 weeks, he's done it. Can he do it against Buffalo's #1 defense is the question, and it's a huge litmus test. This is huge for the Miami Dolphins, and it's even bigger for Tua Tagovailoa to try to beat this juggernaut in your division that has owned you for 3+ years.
It's so weird to hear someone refer to the Bills as a juggernaut, because I was like,
I don't think I would have said that, outside of the early 90s, but even at that point, Miami and Buffalo were typically splitting games.
True.
With Dan Marino versus Jim Kelly. So, but the Bills right now have really been flawless, in my opinion, defensively for the first 2 weeks, and they've been flawless on offense. It's crazy to watch. And these are the aspirations of what the Dolphins need to do, because in my opinion, for many years, the Dolphins were the team that was just under the New England Patriots. They always gave the Patriots a hard time, but they could just never get over the New England Patriots. Buffalo's overtaken New England, and there's Miami again, sitting in second, trying to overtake the guy in first. They have to figure out the way to do it, but it's a good start if you can start getting a win at least once a year against your rival in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great start. And, it's funny too with the litmus test for Miami. I think this game is also a potential litmus test for this Bills defense, who has been vulnerable to certain elements against offenses these last several years. This Bills defense has been very good, #1 in DVOA last year, but they struggle with certain matchups, and those certain matchups they struggled with have been speed and or getting home to the quarterback. In this game, you have the opportunity to get home against an offensive line that's, better, but still maybe putting some things together. But now you've got this speed element that you've been dealing with on a single level in Kansas City because of Tyreek Hill and a little bit with Mecole Hardman. Now Hill is in your division paired with Jaylen Waddle. The Bills go out and they get a Kaiir Elam, and they go out and draft Christian Benford in the 6th round, who has played phenomenal and comes into this game as a starter now. But they looked to reinforce their scheme versatility piece on the back end. This is one of those games where you need that scheme versatility piece, because technique is fantastic. You need to be technically sound. The Bills defense has been that, but there's just sometimes when dudes are either really big and really strong or really fast, and sometimes talent just beats technique and talent just beats scheme. And Hill and Waddle have that speed element. And again, that's why it's such a good litmus test for this Bills defense with that scheme versatility piece. And that's what makes this game even more exciting. You've got what Miami is putting into this game mentally, what it is from a litmus test piece for Tua and the additions that they made, and a first-year head coach, and where this team is trying to go. And I love that you even brought it back to where they've been going up, being #2 to New England. It's just New England goes away, but then someone else takes that spot. And then you're just sitting there at #2 again being like, really? These guys just took that spot. We thought it was going to be our turn. And now, so if you can get that victory against that team, what does that do for you, let alone in the standings, but more from that mental piece? And then the Buffalo Bills, you're trying to ride high. You've got all these injuries. You've started out well. You've got Super Bowl aspirations. You made these tweaks to your defense. Can it pay off against an element that you have tried to be able to fight fire with? Man, I'm very, very excited for this game, not just as a Bills fan, just as a football fan, what it means and what's on the line. And with that being said, I don't think I could have had a better guess
I
for this
appreciate it, man.
episode. Yeah, hell yeah. You were the first. You know what's funny? You were in my head for like weeks because I usually line things up weeks ahead. And it got to be, I think it was Saturday or Friday. And all of a sudden, I don't know why I just assumed. I was like, okay, I got Tom on, blah, blah, blah. And something happened where I was like, I don't think I ever messaged Tom. And I went to my DMs and I was freaking out because I was like, oh my God, what if he can't do it? I just made this immediate assumption that you were my guy. So when you were like, oh, sounds good, I'm ready, I was like, oh, like my heart was skipping some beats. I think I might have even reached out Sunday. I think it was like I just made this assumption. So
Yeah, it was Sunday afternoon. Actually, I was watching my daughter figure skating, and then I saw your message to me on Twitter about coming on, and I looked over at my wife. I'm like, well, it's Bills week. I'm going on cover one to talk Dolphins and Bills again.
there you go.
She's like, all right, have fun.
I was so I was. That's funny that you know this exact place and time. Yeah, I literally was like, yeah, I got Tom, and all of a sudden I just went, I don't think because I was gonna message you something about a follow up to Dolphins Ravens, and then I went in and I was like, oh my God, I didn't actually message him, and I was so yeah, you calmed my nerves by accepting and coming on, and you're getting a lot of positive comments in the chat all episode. Yeah, your knowledge, your way you approach the game, and you know, view it as objective, and the analysis hat that you put on and mixed with your fandom. I really appreciate the hell out of it. And just in case people don't know, tell them where they can find you, follow you, all that stuff. I always like to tell everybody, if you're a Bills fan or not, it's always good to stay up on every other team in the NFL because you want to be able to pay attention to your enemies, especially an in-house, in-division enemy, but also you put together just good content in general. So tell everybody where they can find you and what you do and all that stuff.
I appreciate that. Everyone can follow me on Twitter at Dolphins Talk Tom, all one word. And go to dolphinstalk.com. We have great guests. Actually, we just had our podcast drop about an hour before we came on. We actually had Larry Zonka on.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we had a great interview with him. He's got a new book out, so we get a lot of great guests. We our post game wrap up show where Mike, who is the head of the website, and myself, we break down the game, and we are trying to be as objective as we can. Yes, we're fans of the Miami Dolphins, but at the same time, if the team stinks, we're going to tell you they stink. At the end of the day, that's just who we are on our podcast. So we are objective. Yes, we are Dolphins fans at the end of the day, but we truly try to give you the absolute best perspective we can on the team, and we try to label ourselves as not a homer podcast where we're breaking down each game. But I appreciate you guys having me on as always. Cover One's got always great stuff, so I'm always up on the Bills stuff, even though I live in your guys' backyard.
I know, right? You're so right around the corner.
Yeah, right around the corner. But I appreciate your guys' content and what you guys bring to the table, which is why I enjoy coming on the show.
Awesome. Tom, you were a blast as always. I appreciate the hell out of you. I'm glad we were able to work through the technical difficulties to start when we audio issues to start, but we pulled through. You crushed it. I appreciate you. Enjoy your week. Hopefully you don't stress out too much leading up to the game and during the game. And, maybe we'll see you around these parts again when the Bills and Dolphins meet later in this regular season. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Have a good one, Tom.
Take care.
Tremendous guest, as always, here on Disguise Coverage. I pride myself on bringing on good guests, and Tom crushed it. And as I mentioned, we were having some audio issues to start, and I know there was some potential static stuff during the episode, but we powered through that. But initially when Tom came in, we couldn't hear. Things were going sideways, but he crushed it, his analysis, and I really like this conversation. Again, I don't think we can stress the importance of this game for either team, really. I think it depending on the scale you're looking at it. The Buffalo Bills come into this game riding hot, and they've done so many things defensively to try and alter their game plan and schemability and versatility and multiplicity. It's on the Disguise Coverage bingo card how many times I've said multiplicity and versatility this entire offseason. That's why I wanted, a first-round corner, that ability to play man and have more of a speed element, more of a physical presence. Kaiir Elam is so much of that in that package, in addition with the size and the mental aspect that, the Bills coaching staff gravitates towards in a player. And then Christian Benford's emerged a little bit, but again, all of it is the scheme versatility aspect. You're not truly going to see all of it come to its full form until we see Tre'Davious White come back. But this is a huge litmus test with the speed on the outside for the Miami Dolphins and just the mismatches and potential that they can create. And I like talking about that with Tom, and we're going to keep talking about it on Twitter this entire week. It's a very big week. But now, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, the back half or the back portion of the show, we like to pivot towards kind of analysis of the game the week prior, which in this case, because Disguise coverage is live on a Tuesday and the Bills played on Monday night, this is analysis from last night's game from Bills and Titans. So, folks, family, friends, loved ones, all of those things. Questions about last night's game, thoughts about last night's game. Start throwing them up into the chat. Who do you have as trending up? Who do you have as trending down? As Craig says, pivot. We are pivoting here on Disguise coverage. So who is trending up for you, or what is trending up for you? Who is trending down? What is trending down? Questions about the game from last night. Questions about anything related to the Bills or Dolphins. You know, we like to make this as interactive as possible. So anything you got, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, philosophies, ideologies, maxims, whatever you got, throw them up into the chat. I will bring things up as much as physically and humanly possible. As always, super chats get priority. One, because I respect the monetary donation. Two, because I see the pop color and it attracts my eyes and I bring it through. I've got some stock up, stock down players of my own as well. But I like to get everything from the chat because I think the engagement and live viewership is super awesome in doing these streams. So I will get to that as I start to let you guys think and type and get all your answers in. I'm going to pivot really quick. Another pivot, Craig, that's for you. Another pivot. Sponsor of the show, One Pie Pizza. You see it in the, I was so close to being right on. I'm terrible at this. I never learned. There you go. One Pie Pizza, sponsor of this show. Go in the episode show notes. You will find the online menu to One Pie Pizza. I got a tweet about it today from Joe, who I don't remember his last name, who tried One Pie Pizza for the first time today. Hands down, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Homemade blue cheese, delicious sweet sauce recipe, great cheese to sauce ratio, cup of char pepperoni. They also make a big difference in the community with their initiatives towards helping to try and knock out cancer, Toys for Tots, the Alzheimer's Foundation and Association, the SPCA. They're good people making good food. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Football season is pizza season. Every season should be really pizza season because pizza is fantastic. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Again, the online menu can be found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. Go and get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Also, if you're still here live in this episode, please, please, please drop a like on this video. I saw a couple comments earlier for it. Likes, I know it's corny to ask or say, likes go a long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. Please drop a like on this video here on YouTube if you are so kind, in addition to subscribing to Disguise coverage here on YouTube. And then also on the podcasting apps and platforms, please rate and review and subscribe as well. Let's get into some of the comments from the chat. So again, who's trending up for you? Who's trending down? Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything and anything. I like this question from Nicholas. Nicholas's question is, why are the Bills so good? I don't know if I have enough airtime or enough voice left in me to give the full scope of an answer. I don't like to shortchange answers. That's a very long answer because there's so many pieces, and I don't think I have the voice for it, especially after being at the game last night. I can even hear myself speaking now, how like raspy it is. I don't think I have the voice for that. It's too long of an answer, but I like that question. Oh, Jason says, Anthony, we need to hear about your experience at the stadium. I saw you got to go to the game last second. I did. Super last minute. My cousin has seasons, reached out to myself and my wife late yesterday afternoon, asked if we wanted to go. We did. It was nuts. I lived in New York City for like almost 10 years. And every day I'd come back and visit Buffalo pretty regularly. And still went to some games in between that, but I haven't been to a Bills home opener in, I think if somebody wants to look up the schedule, I haven't been to a Bills home opener, I think since Bills versus Ravens in like 2008 or 9 or something like that. I think it was the home opener. Ravens were away, obviously away. They're here in Buffalo. Ravens were in all white. Bills won that game. I haven't been to a home opener in forever, let alone a home opener on prime time against a team that all Bills fans dislike. The stadium was crazy. The energy was nuts. You could feel the stadium like vibrating and shaking literally like before the game started. And then Bruce gives that awesome speech to start the game. And then Marv Levy comes out and just energy was raucous in a very good way. Just tremendous energy and a tremendous atmosphere and environment. something that was really super cool. And then the Bills won, which is always fun. It makes things better. But yeah, it was absolutely insane in a good way. I want to pull up this comment from Ronald and relate to that. Ronald said, I used to go to the games in the mid-90s. Tickets were $35. I think if you bought like 2 bottles of water now, it would be $35. That's, man, inflation. Crazy, 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 crazy. Comment here from OC in Buffalo. I think this came up earlier based on the time. So the mismatch of our offensive line versus their offense. So the Dolphins offensive line versus the Bills defensive line. I think it could be a potential mismatch. Teron Armstead has some injury concerns. Again, he has the last several years, but when healthy, he's a top 5 left tackle. He's one of the best offensive linemen in football. But Liam Eichenberg at left guard is still a vulnerability for that Dolphins offense. Connor Williams, like Tom alluded to, not a center by trade, but playing well at the center position for Miami this year. He's looked good. Again, limited sample size. Robert Hunt at right guard was someone who came on towards the back half and quarter of last year. Came in as the incumbent starter and has continued to play well for them. Greg Little takes over for Austin Jackson, who got put on IR. Little has been kind of like a journeyman who never really reached his ceiling, but I think, I don't know where there's the comment again. I want to pull it up there for people reading. I think that is an advantage for the Bills. I think the Bills defensive line versus the Dolphins offensive line is advantage Bills, and it's one that they need. I mentioned it before. I think Tua is better than Bills fans want to give him credit for, but even if he's not, Hill and Waddle, their speed is so real that you don't have to be a great quarterback to be good with them, or even in Mike McDaniel's scheme and system. You don't have to be this world beater with a great arm and great accuracy and throw with anticipation and be able to go through progression passing and your reads and go from 1 to 2 to 3 or even 4. If you can do all those things, that's feather in your cap and awesome. Good for you. But you don't necessarily have to be that. This offense is an RPO offense at times where Tua is just making one simple read and just trying to get the ball into the hands of the guys who are faster and a better athlete than probably everybody else on the field. It's simple. It's not crazy. And this Bills defensive line is going to have to control the line of scrimmage against the run with those light boxes that the Bills like to play, but also, like we talked about, generate pressure on Tua. Not crazy. The Bills want to generate pressure with just their front 4. They want to drop 7 into coverage, and you're going to need to in this game against the Miami Dolphins. What Mike McDaniel will do, I mentioned it earlier, simple tweaks and things that they do. Oh, I got to stop because I saw a super chat come up. Oh boy, I got to stop everything I'm doing. Jason, thank you for being here as always. You're a huge supporter of mine and the channel and the team, so I appreciate that. I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the comment, and thank you for the super chat very much. Jason says, Tremaine Edmunds, stock up, going full Robert Saleh and taking receipts on everyone who trash talked him. Levels of stock up. I want him re-signed since last year. This is his year where it all comes together for him. Tremaine Edmunds balled out last night. Actually, I'll just jump into it right now. I'm going to get back to my thought, but he is one of my stock up players along with Matt Milano. Edmunds, we saw right from that run blitz early in the game where he knifes right through. It's play action. He reads that it's going to be pass, keeps going past. Ooh, Donut Bob coming through and saying, Jason, 1,000%. Yes. Edmunds' stock is big up. Even from run blitz comes through. You see the size and the speed and the athleticism all in one motion for Tremaine Edmunds. Comes through, gets the sack on Tannehill. We see the play later. I put it out on Twitter today. Milano comes through, disrupts. Edmunds comes down onto Derrick Henry. Henry goes for that stiff arm. Edmunds chops it down, wraps up Henry, then takes his left arm, swings it around, and tries to punch the football out. It was a technical, physical play from Tremaine Edmunds, and it was beautiful. He had several one-on-one tackles with Derrick Henry. He also, on the Jordan Poyer interception, carries the wide receiver across the field, reaches out with his pterodactyl wings, gets a piece of the ball, deflects it. The ball then deflects off the receiver's hands, goes to Micah Hyde, who deflects it up into the air, and then Jordan Poyer makes the interception. But that play only happens because of Tremaine Edmunds' speed, Also processing and recognition, because it's play action. So it's play action. Tremaine reads play action like the Bills linebackers are taught to do under Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott. Then he sees it's going to be a pass. So he stops, turns his back to Ryan Tannehill, and locates the receiver coming across the field on the over. Then he has to take the proper angle and cut that receiver off and not let them get across the field completely clean. Cuts the receiver off, gets a hand on him so he has a feel for him, turns back to Ryan Tannehill, sees the ball get thrown. Granted, Tannehill could have led the receiver potentially a little more, although the corner on that other side was sitting, so the window was still going to be tight. Not that easy of a throw. Tannehill puts that ball on target. Pterodactyl arms come through for Tremaine Edmunds, gets a piece. We see multiple deflections and an interception. You saw on that play the athleticism, the size, the range, but also the processing. I've talked about it so GD much for Tremaine Edmunds that he's not as bad as people think he is. He's also hasn't been as good as people think he is, but he does a lot of things that don't necessarily get noticed. What was funny about last night's game was the things that he was doing were leading to splash plays, tackles for loss, sacks, and interceptions. He's been making good plays his entire career. Even last year, he's been making plays that stand out. But like I've said, they're not ones that stand out on the box score. They're not ones that are splash plays. Nobody is watching a highlight of Tremaine Edmunds executing good coverage and making the quarterback look away from that receiver and go throw the ball somewhere else. That's not a highlight. Highlights are interceptions, tackles for loss, big hits, forced fumbles, sacks, things that go more towards the toxic differential side of things. Edmunds hasn't been doing that in the last couple of years, especially last year, although he did have that one interception against Washington or Houston. I don't remember, but it was nice. He balled out last night. So yes, excellent comment, Jason. You saw Tremaine Edmunds flying around, making a... Oh, excuse me there with the cough. Oh, I'm coughing up a lung live. You saw a really good variety of plays in a variety of ways, and it was impressive. And again, I think he's been making good plays, even going back to last year and early in his career. But what you saw last night was what people have been clamoring for when he was drafted. Splash plays, plays that change. I can't, Ronald. Things that change the game, things that change that differential. He made game-changing plays last night in a multitude of ways, and the Bills are going to need him to continue to play like that with the potential injuries that this defense is going to have going into Miami. And appreciate you, RJ. RJ says, you said nobody's watching Edmunds do the non-splash plays, you liar. Cover One is watching Edmunds do that for a year. That's correct. But the problem is when you make observations that not everyone else observes, they label you a homer or a liar. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. This is funny from Jason. Jason says, someone cut this up so it looks like Ant is getting emotional and crying about Edmunds. It would be so sweet. That would be very funny. If someone does that, please DM it to me on Twitter at @pro__Ant. That would be very funny. But yes, Edmunds stock way up. And also, his running mate, Matt Milano, his stock is up as well. Milano crushed Malik Willis last night. He had a pick six. He probably should have had another interception as well of Malik Willis. You saw him several times. He had a couple big hits, but he also, like I mentioned, on that one successful play with Edmunds where he chopped down the arm of Henry and made the tackle for loss in the backfield. Matt Milano is a disruptor for this Bills defense. He always has been. Milano is usually the disruptor. Edmunds is the cleaner. He's the guy who cleans everything up, puts a nice little bow on everything after Milano blitzes or jumps inside or darts inside or blows somebody up. They work so well together as a tandem and as a team. And you saw a lot of that from Milano last night. Very coverage sound, making splash plays. Also, how effective he was coming forward against the run. We saw the Bills commit to that against Tennessee. This run game is what makes Tennessee go. I don't think that's revelatory. I don't think that's anything new. I don't think anybody should be hearing that and being like, oh my God, what tremendous insight. Everything feeds off of Derrick Henry and funnels off of Derrick Henry, particularly that wide zone, outside zone type of run scheme. Although the Titans have been varying it up. In week 1 against the Giants, 21 carries for Derrick Henry, 11 zone, 10 gap. We saw a different kind of run scheme. So we saw more versatility and variability in the Titans running offense. Bills didn't care. Bills focused. They loaded up the box. We saw several times where they would go with 5 down, sometimes 6 down on the front on the defensive line. We saw a couple snaps where it's 4 down, and then you got Edmonds and Milano in the box, and you've got another safety and Taron Johnson, and they're just loading up, 8, 9 guys in the box, all to stop Derrick. And rightfully so. Ryan Tannehill's success, a lot of it is tied to play action. No, you don't have to have a good running attack to have a good play action game. Yes, it does help if you do. Tannehill's numbers were drastically different in week 1, 12.2 yards per attempt. In week 1 against the Giants off of play action, 5.5 without it. Completion percentage dips, yards dip. They like to take shot plays off the play action, so their passing game stems from Derrick Henry. Their run game obviously stems from Derrick Henry. Who they are as an offense, their nucleus is tied to Derrick Henry. The Bills ID'd that, as every team does, but there's a difference between IDing it and being able to actually stop it functionally. The Bills did that. Part of it was the defensive front, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but a lot of it was the play from the guys at the second level, mainly Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano. Yes, you had support from Taron Johnson, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer, but those second-level defenders, those linebackers, Milano and Edmonds, big-time stock up for their performance against the Tennessee Titans, against both the pass and against the run. And it's going to have to continue against the Miami Dolphins because, like I mentioned, they're often going to be those conflict players. They're going to be those guys who Tua is IDing when it comes to executing those RPOs. They're going to be those guys that are caught between having to play the pass and play the run against this Dolphins offense, and where Tua is going to want to work, combined with getting the ball to Jaylen, Waddle, and Tyreek Hill. Those linebackers are going to have to be fast-flowing and active, rallying and tackling regularly against these receivers that specialize in yards after catch. Again, it's not an overly complicated offense. Their offense is, we've got these 2 amazing guys at wide receiver. We're just going to give them the ball any way we can and then hope it works. So Edmonds and Milano are going to need to continue to trend upwards in this game, just in general for this Bills defense, but especially with potentially no Micah Hyde, no Jordan Phillips, no Dane Jackson. We'll see what happens with Ed Oliver. We'll see what happens with Tim Settle. Milano also got banged up a little bit at the end on that hit against Malik Willis, got a stinger, but he should be okay. So we'll see what happens. But those 2 are definitely trending upward. Who else is trending upwards? Not crazy, but Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. I always like to base this off of relative expectations. I think people who are trending upwards or trending downwards, it's versus that baseline level of expectations. For me, I have a high baseline for Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs. I think they're both all-pro caliber players. So in order for me personally to trend upwards, you have to have an amazing performance. And Josh Allen and Stefon Diggs did. They basically only played 3 quarters of football last night because the Bills pulled their starters there before the 4th because the game was so out of hand. And you saw, again, another game with true command for Josh Allen in this offense. I'm not even really going to mention the box scores and the stat lines, but I mentioned it earlier. The Bills had no run game last night. The Tennessee Titans defensive line was controlling the trenches when it came to the run. They were getting penetration. They were getting push. They were playing on the Bills side of the line of scrimmage. Whether Mitch Morse was in there, whether when Morse was out, didn't matter. The Bills were not getting push in that run game. So the Bills pivoted. They still used some play action and still were able to work it despite not having success in the run game. They were able to push the ball vertically, manipulate the Titans' coverage schemes, making them pay. There's the 1 touchdown to, Diggs had 3 of them, but Titans go single high. They go in a cover 3 look, which you don't want to do against the Bills. You don't want to go man coverage and you don't want to go single high. And Josh Allen manipulates. You get the over coming from the right side of the field. Byard comes up. Diggs beats Avery on the out and up. It was a really well-designed play, but the throw was perfect on that deep shot to Diggs. And again, it's just another game where Josh Allen is manipulating coverages. He's making reads pre-snap and IDing coverage schemes and looks. And It's him making reads in his progression post-snap, his ability to go from 1, 2 to 3, to continue to use his legs, not just to run, but to extend the play and create explosives, his ability to sit in the pocket, manipulate the pocket, throw with accuracy, throw downfield. I honestly think there's 2 throws that stick out that he really missed. The one that he dirted to Jake Kumaro on the 3rd down, and then the one to Reggie Gilliam up the sideline. Other than that, I know he had some incompletions, but he's just firing on all cylinders right now. And I already have a high baseline for him, but the game he had last night, again, highlights how good of a player he is. What I do think is annoying, it'd be awesome if Josh Allen won MVP. He's not going to have those inflated stats if the Bills keep playing to this level as a team, because he's not going to play a lot in the 4th quarter, and he's not going to have opportunities for more yards and touchdowns, which is going to change box score numbers, which is going to change MVP votes. Little side thing that I'm kind of annoyed about. But Josh Allen stock up, and Stefon Diggs. Tom mentioned it earlier in this episode. Stefon Diggs, he said, one of the top receivers in the NFL, which he is. He's arguably the best route runner in the NFL. But last night, you saw everything. His ability to get vertical up the sideline, to get vertical in the middle of the field, to win underneath, to win in the intermediate, a little bit of yards after catch. How many times did we just see great communication and chemistry between he and Josh Allen on those free access RPOs? Those are the ones where, Josh snaps it, puts it in Singletary's belly, and Diggs is just running like a quick 5-yard out. There were just so many easy 5 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards, 11 yards, 50-yard touchdown. Just a variety of shots, and that's a functionality of both Diggs and Allen. But a lot of it starts with both. Josh has to ID it and he has to execute, but it's only possible if you have that quality at that receiver position. Stefon Diggs was crushing it, and you see that versatility, that mismatch capability, which is what you want. Christian Fulton was out for the Titans. Roger McCreary was covering Diggs at times. And then all of a sudden they were like, forget putting Diggs on McCreary. Let's put him on Avery and these other corners. And Diggs just ate these other corners alive. True mismatch. They spammed that matchup. Allen to Diggs over and over again. Again, I already have a high baseline for Stefon Diggs, but he played so well last night. I think it's hard to see that performance and not think that his stock is anything but up. Someone else who is stock up for me, I spoke about him on Twitter today, Daquan Jones. He's another guy who he's made some splash plays and he's shown up a little bit at times, but Daquan Jones is just literally doing his 111th on almost every play. There's him winning in one-on-one matchups and getting penetration, or holding strong at the point of attack and extending and two-gapping and kind of fitting the run however he needs to. He's standing up strong against double teams. This is all against the run. But then even against the pass, he's getting pass rush, he's getting penetration, he's getting to the quarterback, he's getting sacks, he's getting hits on the QB, he's getting in passing lanes. And then you add all that on top of Ed Oliver being down after week 1, you got to rely on him even more as one of the other, quote unquote starters, because it was going to be him and Ed with Settle and Phillips in that rotational role. His stock is way, way up for me. I think Daquan Jones is on that Bills defense that's had several standout performances these first 2 weeks. I think Daquan Jones is in the top 3 for Buffalo Bills defenders so far this year, just because what he does allows so many other people to succeed, like Tremaine Edmonds, like we talked about all offseason. He unlocks a lot for this Bills defense. He's played well from a technicality perspective, but also from a physicality perspective. He adds something to this defense. And I see the comment here from Craig, like who we wanted Star to be. I feel bad because I know Star had some off the field things going on, and there were spurts where he played well. But yeah, like the bigger bodied physical presence that also offered some pass rush. That's what the idea was for Star when he came here, and he never really got to reach those expectations or those heights. Daquan Jones seems to be reaching those expectations and exceeding them to some degree. I had a lot of high hopes for him coming in, and he continues week after week. There's always some play that I just realize where he is completely in control of what is going on in front of him. And it's just impressive given, what is asked of him and what he is supposed to do. So those are my main stock ups at this point. Same thing for Craig, saying Daquan's strength is crazy. He throws massive men around. That's a huge piece. Offensive linemen are like big dudes, unless you're Aaron Brewer. Guard for the Titans who weighs like 280 pounds. Other than that, they're usually like 325 plus or 305. And Daquan Jones is just out here bench pressing them left and right like they don't mean anything. And man, it's absolutely wild how Daquan Jones has played and what he's done. Awesome comment here from Ronald saying Gilliam's touchdown was well earned. Yeah, I mean, he made two guys miss, broke a tackle, got upfield, showed some vision. He's somebody who I was high on coming into this year because of how his role expanded down the stretch in 2021, what his versatility allows you to do. He added a power run game element to the Buffalo Bills. All of a sudden, their offense was able to execute power and counter and more gap scheme runs. And then you add his athleticism, and all of a sudden you got some play action aspects or some aspects out in the passing game, whether it's in the screen or the short and underneath areas. Like I mean this as a compliment. I think he's getting there to being like a poor man's Kyle Juszczyk. And Kyle Juszczyk is the definition of a chess piece as the fullback / H-back there for the San Francisco 49ers, consummate all-pro, an absolute monster to have to account for if you're the defense. Kyle Shanahan has talked about it before on why he goes with 21 personnel, and in particular uses Kyle Juszczyk because of how it forces the defense's hands, and maybe he has to make them play with another linebacker in base defenses, or if they stay in nickel, then he can easily beat those nickel defenders, and it gives you a run advantage option against those boxes and against those personnel groupings. Or again, if they bring in that third linebacker, now you have potential mismatch in the pass game. It just the mental games that you can play with teams in addition to the physical aspect. Kyle Juszczyk has been that for Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. Gilliam is getting to some of those levels with the Buffalo Bills. Not there yet, mainly because I just value Juszczyk so much. I think he's absolutely phenomenal. So Gilliam not being there isn't a slight against Gilliam. It's just that Juszczyk is tremendous. Also, again, fun fact, the Buffalo Bills, when they signed Pat DeMarco, they also tried to sign Kyle Juszczyk, but the Niners gave him a bigger contract. So keep that in mind for what Sean McDermott has potentially wanted in this offense. But yes, Gilliam is really standing out in a variety of ways every week. I don't think he's someone that the offense is going to funnel through or necessarily rely on. But again, you've got another chess piece that allows you to get to multiple things from one personnel grouping. And that's always a positive for any team, but especially this Buffalo Bills offense that already has a dominant player in Josh Allen and a dominant passing attack that teams have to account for. Stock down. I really only have one, and I think it's kind of expected given how well the Bills played last night, and I'm going to kind of put this all into one grouping. The Bills' offensive line in the run game. I like I mentioned, just no push. They were losing, whether the Titans were getting penetration, whether they just weren't able to generate push. The Titans were playing on the Bills' side of the line of scrimmage, whether it was gap runs, whether it was zone runs. They were just not holding their own. Even in pass protection a little bit, there were some times Spencer Brown got beat, Roger Saffold got beat, but that happens from time to time. So I think their pass protection was better than the run game blocking. But yeah, it was, man, I wanted to see more from them in the run game. I know Jeffrey Simmons is a beast. I also like Bud Dupree as well. And aside from those, I know that they got Autry, but I thought there could be more workability from the Bills' offensive line in the run game against the Tennessee Titans front. And other than the one Devin Singletary run and the one Zach Moss run, there wasn't really a lot of success from straight regular runs. And on this one, I don't put too much onto Singletary and Moss necessarily for that. I think, I think you got to tip your cap to the Titans' defensive line. They won their matchups consistently across the board. And then you have to look at the Bills' offensive line in the run game, especially a unit that was solid and sound in week 1 against the Rams. It looked like they just got out muscled and got beat physically. Also from a potential scheme perspective as well. I have to fully dive into the all 22 for the Bills offense, to completely formulate my theories and thoughts and analysis for them. But in being there live and then watching the game back on the broadcast and taking a look at a couple pieces of film, it just seemed, whether it was Singletary, whether it was Moss, whoever it was, it started with that offensive line not being able to get push, not being able to execute up front, again, in the run game. So that's a stock down piece for me, which isn't, again, if you want to look at last night's game, you can sit there and be like, well, it doesn't matter because the Bills put up 41 points. Granted, 7 of them came from a pick six. So you're sitting there going, The Bills put up 34 points without a running game. Cool, the running game doesn't matter. I think it will at some point. I think you always need to have that pivot. You always need to have that multiplicity. You always need to be able to throw rock, paper, and scissors. So it'll be nice for them to kind of retool a little bit, but they're going to have their hands full with that Miami defense. You got another player in Christian Wilkins who's stout on the interior, and you have a group that does like to stop the run and occupy gaps, and they will run blitz that turns into pass blitzes as well. So we'll see what we get from that Bills offensive line against Miami. But right now, for me, they're a bit of a stock down. Again, it's all based on baseline expectation. I believe in Aaron Cromer, and I like the pieces that they added. But it's that expectation. I think after the Rams game, I was like, okay, we've turned a corner here, see what we got. And I think they were trending up after the Rams. I think it's starting to trend down now, but we'll see what happens against Miami. Good point here from Richard. Richard saying, again, Singletary making moves 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Yeah, that's, he was making guys miss and just barely getting back to the line. And, he was turning runs into 2nd and 9, which was good because if he got hit in the backfield, it would have been like 2nd and 13. And then when Moss was running, there was really no lanes for him to go in the zone run. So when it was zone or gap, there just wasn't a lot of options for either running back. And when you see that type of struggle from both running backs in a variety of schemes and looks, it has to start with the offensive line. Again, that relationship is so very symbiotic, but it started with the offensive line. They did not have their best week at all, but the Bills did, and they came away with a win. And now we're going to start to wind down here on this episode of Disguised Coverage. I appreciate everyone for joining me on this special, again, Tuesday edition of Disguised Coverage. We will be back to our regularly scheduled Wednesday, 7 p.m. time slot live next week. But I appreciate everyone for tuning in to, kind of like impromptu. Communication really went out for it today. So I recognize people's schedules may change. You may not be able to hit everything. So thank you very much to everyone who tuned in live to this episode. Jason, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate you. Thank you to everyone who gave kind words to Tom, our guest in the first half of this show for analysis on the Miami Dolphins, a little peek behind the curtain into their world. But again, I really want to thank everyone for joining me live on this episode, all the kind words, the viewership, anything, whatever have you. If you are still here live, please drop a like on this video. It goes a tremendously long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you didn't love or like this episode, that's fine. Again, look inward and figure out what's wrong with you, because I feel like that's kind of more of a you thing, but you never know, to each their own. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, please tell your family and friends and loved ones about Disguised Coverage. If you hate this episode or me or the show, tell your enemies, try and ruin their day. If you are on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. Subscribe to Disguised Coverage as well on YouTube. If you're watching later, listening later, whatever have you, thank you very much for your view, your listen, your download, whatever have you. I appreciate any and every ounce of support in whatever form and or fashion it comes in. Thank you very much to my guest tonight, Mr. Tom Ernisse of Dolphins Talk, for providing objective insight and analysis into this Miami Dolphins Buffalo Bills matchup. I appreciate cool comments like this that say, again, this versus ESPN, no contest. That's tremendously humbling and awesome to hear, because they are a sports giant and I am not. So thank you very much for awesome comments like that. I sincerely appreciate it. Oh, thank you very much, Rich. Thank you very much. Now there's more positive comments coming in. I always feel corny when I pull up too much, but just know I do see all of them, and I greatly appreciate them in all of their forms. Thank you very much, folks, for tuning into this episode. Tune into the Cover One Film Room live tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern in the normal Disguised Coverage time slot for a breakdown from myself, Eric Turner, and Kendall Mursky on some really fun aspects from the Bills-Titans game from last week that we will be breaking down with the All-22 game film. I'm starting to cough again. I do not have my voice back from last night. A lot of screaming and hollering and cheering. With that being said, thank you very much. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well, staying safe, be kind to one another, take care of one another. I will see you next week live Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern for the regularly scheduled time slot version of Disguised Coverage. Thank you all, folks. I appreciate you. Tell all your family and friends and loved ones about this show. Subscribe, likes, rates, reviews, all that kind of stuff. I appreciate you all more than you will ever know. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.